Hi guys, in today's no-nonsense news report, a COD dev has been taking shots at Black Ops 6. Black Ops 6 is up for some awards, but not the ones you might expect, and there's a new patch that we're going to go through, which doesn't fix the stuff that you might be hoping it fixes, but it does address things that you might be having fun with. There is some good news though, so stay tuned, let's get into it. We'll start here with the good news, which is that Legacy XP tokens have been updated to be properly supported inside Black Ops 6, following the controversy from last week where they removed the XP tokens, and then everyone was like, what the hell are you guys doing? This absolutely sucks, this makes no sense. And then they were like, oh, we do plan to bring them back. There's just stability issues with them right now, but we'll bring them back next patch. But then people were debating whether or not they were saying that just to try and save face and they were lying, or whether there were actually stability issues caused by the tokens, despite the fact that they were still usable in Warzone and carried over just fine to Black Ops 6. So there was a lot of confusion about exactly what was going on there. But now already, which is good, I'm glad that this didn't take another week or something to happen, the Legacy XP tokens have been properly deployed in the game and are accessible for you to use. They've also improved hit marker UI to help identify individual shots more easily, which I think is quite interesting. I haven't personally had any issues with this whatsoever, but it's a global change, so maybe this was something that multiplayer or Warzone players were having troubles with. If that was you, let me know in the comments down below. They've also addressed an issue where weapon sights would be misaligned with the Weaver Repairman Operator skin equipped, which is great news because basically every single weapon that you equipped when you had that skin on would be kind of offset, so you'd be kind of firing into thin air instead of at the zombies' heads that you were trying to target. Also in the store, they say that they've improved the loading of Tracer and Inspect preview videos for weapons. I also think it would be really cool if when you were on the battle pass and you scrolled to a new item on it, it didn't take like 10 seconds to load in. I think that that's something that Treyarch could hopefully fix pretty easily by just allocating more resources in that part of the menu to actually load those things, or preloading those things maybe. Because right now, I'll scroll along to a page on the battle pass and I just won't be able to see what I'm looking at for like a good 10-15 seconds, or I have to scroll and scroll back and scroll and scroll back, and then eventually it'll show up. It's just a bit fiddly. Now there's some uninteresting multiplayer changes, but then there is one that is actually relevant to you guys because it did affect zombies too, and it's this UI one. So they addressed an unintentional bug, and I'm very sad this was an unintentional bug because it was really cool, where Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3 camos could be applied to Black Ops 6 weapons. So you could take retroactive camos from those previous games and apply them to your current guns in this game and shred out with them, and it was sick. They say camos from previous titles were not designed for Black Ops 6 weapons and attachments are not supported due to visual inconsistencies. The crazy thing about this is that while they say they weren't designed for Black Ops 6 weapons, they worked on the weapons. Like, there's always this talk every single year, right, of devs being like, no, we can't copy paste code. That's not how it works. That's just not how these games are designed, etc. And that is true. And I'm not saying that that is a lie. But in this case, it's just a hilarious consequence of the fact that Call of Duty is on a unified engine now, that the whole kind of copy-pasting argument is actually starting to become a little bit more valid, because you can use those old stuff on the modern guns and it doesn't completely break the game. Like, it does kind of work. And it's just going to increase the kind of volume of the people making the argument that we should always have access to all our legacy camos in all future games. And the fact that that resets each year, or not every single year, but that resets on a year like this, is silly. Like, we're just paying for things we've already earned, and we're paying for the privilege to get them again. Like, that's weird, right? So I think that this kind of bug starts to show that it would actually be easier to implement them than maybe we all think, potentially. They've also addressed an issue where some perk bags weren't displaying. Okay, yeah, whatever. Now then we get to zombies, and this is where things start getting a little bit more interesting. So for Gobblegums, over this past weekend, so many people have been using various Gobblegum glitches to exploit the game to get more XP and basically get to Prestige 10 instantly. Like, I saw someone get to Prestige 10 in like 6 hours or something. It was insane. And the way this worked is that certain gobbles would just persist forever. So you'd be able to, for example, get infinite insta-kill, or infinite free fire was another big one that people were really leaning into, because that meant you had infinite ammo, so you could just sit there, you wouldn't even need the infinite insta-kill, you could just shoot zombies forever. So that's been patched now, but realistically, I think that the community is going to find a way to just start doing this again by the time I even get this video up. And I'm going to get this video up within like an hour of the patch going out, because I always do. And if you want to make sure you don't miss out patch info in the future, then make sure you're subscribed. But yeah, I think the community is just going to find a workaround, because every single time they've done a patch with some kind of exploit being resolved, we found a workaround straight away. So I don't have any hope for the team here, to be honest. I think they're just gonna have to keep on patch by patch trying to fight back against all the community exploiters. It's honestly quite a funny war to be watching. But I did talk in my podcast with JGod about the fact that this might actually cause other problems for the game in terms of the way they balance things that we aren't really seeing right now, but might have long-term effects. So that was quite an interesting convo. You guys might be interested in that. It was my JGod podcast the other day. In the UI section, they've added additional information for the current saved game in the map selection menu. I think that the more they can add here, the better. I think that's just always going to be useful for people. And there are the classic stability improvements. Now, what this does not include is any of the stuff in the known issues section of the Zombies Trello, which Treyarch and Call of Duty and Activision update to let the community know what bugs they're aware of in the game that they are planning to fix. So we've got closing Gobblegum exploits, but we don't have these, which sucks. I think that's something which is just unfortunate prioritization, but it is what it is. So let's talk through what these are now. First of all, the issue where you lose all in-magazine ammo for your weapon when applying armor plates, still in the game. Also, this bug where you run slower than intended while reloading is also still present. And this sucks because it means that all current speedruns, like for example, I think Kingman got a new record on Terminus last night of like 21 minutes, 45 seconds. Those new runs are going to be wiped from the leaderboard once the patch comes out to fix the sprint speed, because it's going to be different versions of the game and different speeds going to be possible completely. Or at least that's my understanding of how they're going to deal with the leaderboards there. And that's really unfortunate because all the hard work that these guys are putting in right now is just going to disappear overnight. So I would really like to see this changed, and especially seeing as I've been going for Terminus speedruns as well myself, I think that it would be really nice to have this be sort of the highest priority thing. But this next bug is really, really frustrating as well. And that's that you can only craft and use one lethal or tactical at a time at the crafting table, but it's actually worse than Treyarch are even saying here. So it's not that you can just craft one at a time, but it's also that sometimes you'll craft one, it will say you've crafted it, it will take your salvage, but then it will still say 0. Like you won't even have one, it'll just stay 0 in your inventory. Then when you try and pick another one of them up off the floor, it'll still say 0, and you just get into this kind of infinite loop of not being able to have any equipment whatsoever. And I even had the bug extend to my score streak the other day, where I could permanently not access my score streak, and weirdly, I also couldn't armor plate up like this, but I could get the plates on my plate bar. So the plating animation was just gone. It disappeared. And I guess that's why I couldn't pull out my score streak, because it required me to pull out the laptop and it wouldn't let me do that, or it wouldn't let me do the injector. But yeah, it still allowed me to actually get the plates, which was nice. And honestly, that's how the game should work just in general. I mean, it felt like gold armor. It was wonderful. But yeah, these bugs still being in the game overall sucks. It's been several days now. There are several other things that Treyarch have fixed in that time. And I think especially the sprint and the crafting table here a really high priority. They really impact the experience. Sprint well, maybe slightly less so for more casual players, but I would love to see both of those change. Treyarch, please. There's also a bunch of community bug reports that have been posted to my subreddit or just tweeted at me and things like that. So Jaden here says that the armory doesn't open sometimes, despite the fact that you're using a key, and I've had this happen to me as well, so that would be great to get a fix for. And there's a bug where you can't equip or access Gobblegum packs for an entire prestige. So yeah, you lose your packs when you prestige, we all know that, but then you just can't edit or change them at all for the entirety of 1 through 50. Like, or is it 55? I forget. It's an insane bug. And also, a really annoying bug is the one where amalgams are still sucking you to death. And this is something that Treyarch said that they fixed, but they actually didn't fix all of the instances where it happens. So the context here is that if you had turtle shell on, you'd get sucked by an amalgam, and then because you had turtle shell, all your armor was on your back, not on your front, and amalgams do front damage, and so you get sucked from the front so hard that you would just insta-die. And Treyarch changed it so that with turtle shell, amalgams do now take into account the fact that you've got armor mitigation present, even though it's just on your back. But the issue is that Dying Wish, the augment for quick revive, doesn't take that into account. It doesn't have awareness of the fact that they've made that other change. And so Dying Wish goes, oh, you just took full damage from an amalgam? That means that we're going to put you to 1 HP because that's the health that you get set to when your Dying Wish activates, and we're going to take away your quick revive. So you lose quick revives just because you're getting sucked by an amalgam one time, even if you're on full health, full armor. And this one really needs a fix. This one sucks. Literally. Now, I mentioned that Black Ops 6 was up for some awards, but ones you might not expect. So the games up for Game of the Year this year are Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor Refantasio, and the DLC for Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. Now, I posted a tweet about this being like, I'm just surprised that a DLC is able to win Game of the Year. Like, that just is a little confusing to me. And I had a lot of responses saying, Milo, you just don't get it, bro. Shadow of the Erdtree is the size of a game, so it should be able to win Game of the Year. It's just fairer that way. Like, it just makes sense. So, like, fair enough if that's your opinion. But Black Ops 6 is not on the list for Game of the Year, but it is on the list for Best Audio Design, Best Multiplayer, Best Action Game, and Innovation in Accessibility. Now, the audio one is a little surprising to me because in Zombies, I think they cooked. I think that the Zombies audio is phenomenal. I am so happy with how it performs, from the music, the sound effects, the voiceover, the VO performances, like everything in Zombies, I genuinely think is stellar. I think they did an incredible job, but I've seen so many complaints about the audio in Warzone this year, and Warzone is an integral part of Call of Duty, and if you're gonna have a best audio category for the game, and it's gonna compete in that category and potentially win it, surely a game where an entire third of the experience is suffering from massive systemic issues in the audio department is not gonna be eligible. Like, surely that should be a blocker towards it progressing towards winning best audio. And I say that still, again, loving how it is in Zombies. I just recognize that Zombies is only a third of the product. And I've actually seen really mixed opinions about Warzone overall this year. I've seen some people saying that Rebirth Island is fun and it's sort of a step in the right direction towards a more polished game towards the release of Avalon next year. But then I've seen other posts like this one from Tactical Brit, which I think are really well-reasoned takes. He says that Warzone doesn't have potential, it has a ceiling, and it repeatedly fails to punch through that ceiling because every 12 months, they pile in an integration and then proceed to spend 4 to 6 months fixing it, and then obviously that just happens again the following year. He says he enjoys it when it's not busted and it's the most fun BR experience with the most engaging mid-game, but it feels chronically mismanaged. And if this is the state of this integration with Rebirth, imagine what Verdansk looks like when we know for a fact that at this point it was a last-minute decision to pivot from Verdansk and not release Avalon. So do you agree with TacBrit here, or do you think that Warzone actually has a lot of potential and that's coming in the future? Anyway, Charlie Intel were covering all of the Game Awards stuff that I just mentioned to you, and they posted a very standard tweet about it, and then an ex-COD dev chimed in the replies and started taking shots at Call of Duty, at the devs specifically. It was wild. So I was asking, is there any detail on what the innovation in accessibility is for? Because I'm planning to maybe make a video about that, and I just wanted some more detail, and I'll save that for that next video. But then Brian Bright here, who made Infinite Warfare Zombies, right? He was the project director for Call of Duty Infinite Warfare Zombies and for Extinction, and he did a bunch of other stuff. He's now retired. He tweeted and said, innovation in accessibility because it has an option to turn off spiders in a zombies mode, creating a safe space for people with arachnophobia, rad. So this was just the first of several tweets, okay? But it's wild because the innovation in accessibility is not because it has the option to turn off spiders in a zombies mode. And like, I asked the same question just sort of through a slightly different lens, right? With slightly nicer gloves on. But I said like, what is the innovation and accessibility for? And I got a response straight away from Tyler here, which I was very grateful for, with this blog post. And if you look at the blog post, there's a ton of stuff here that is really cool. Like asymmetrical hearing compensation settings. I've never seen that in Call of Duty before. That means that players with asymmetrical hearing can create profiles and adjust audio settings for each ear. That's amazing. There's the high contrast settings as well, which I mentioned in my recent tips video, which you guys should check out because it's a good video, I promise. There's also a bunch of stuff for button pressing. So if you've got some kind of mobility issue with your fingers and things like that, you can still use the Omni movement. There's a bunch of HUD preset stuff, which there always is. And there's arachnophobia. So this is just one of what I've already covered like 7 things. And there's a bunch of other stuff in this blog post here as well. So just by asking the question of like, what's this for? I got a list of like 10 things, right? But Brian is just instantly going to the fact that it's got arachnophobia mode and he doesn't think that that's cool. Like he's been very sarcastic when he says, rad. Now I tried to get more information out of him as to like what his gripe was here, because maybe I just don't fully understand his perspective, and maybe there is something that's being done here that from the inside, right, from his experience at the studio, would mean that this is something that might be worth critiquing in some way. So I said, like, first of all, surely the devs making these changes are your ex-colleagues, right? Like, this is kind of a crazy thing to be saying on the timeline. Do you think that their work sucks, or is something else going on here? Like, what exactly is the reason for him taking issue so much with creating a safe space for people with arachnophobia? And he responded saying, first of all, they're likely not his ex-colleagues anymore, and whoever made the spider toggle in Zombies had to be trolling. It's a bridge too far, but he's all for other accessibility features. So I think he's being a little bit willfully ignorant of the fact that there's a bunch of other accessibility stuff that they have done in the game, which is good. But I was really curious. I was like, hold on a second. Why is it a bridge too far? Like, a bridge too far to what? Where are we bridging to here, Brian? Like, I just don't understand. Like, have you seen how they look in game? It's actually pretty funny. Like, I actually prefer playing with them on arachnophobia mode in game because I think it's just goofy and I enjoy it that way. Like little slugs flying at me is funny. And I said, seeing as you spent years of your life working on a more zany take on zombies, I figured that a funnier option would resonate with you. And so I was like, I'm just confused. I'm confused that a COD dev would just sort of randomly attack the game on the timeline like this. Like, this just seems confusing. So I tweeted saying, this is wild that a COD dev is saying this sort of stuff. Like, I just can't believe what I'm reading here. And he jumped in again and said, it's not wild, actually. Which, first of all, I thought was very funny. I retired after making games forever, but it's obvious the lawyer class forced the dev team to coddle to people scared of spiders in a freaking zombies game. This is just dumb. And at this point, I was like, wait a second. Like, Brian, you're really confusing me here, bud. Because Infinite Warfare Zombies is the same. It's not scary. It's a freaking zombies game, sure, but Infinite Warfare Zombies is goofy as hell. So I said, did the lawyers force you to make Infinite Warfare Zombies less serious, gritty, scary, etc. than literally every other COD Zombies iteration past and present to this day? Or did you do that because you thought it would be fun? And where I'm going with this line of reasoning is, if you did it because you thought it would be fun, maybe the devs in this case also put their time into doing the arachnophobia mode because they thought it might be fun as well. And he came back again and he said, no, I was pointing fun at COD going to space with warp drives. So he's saying he wasn't forced to make it less gritty. He did it of his own volition, right? He did it out of his own choice. The other option I had was a Spec Ops in space, which we prototyped and was lame because marketing was nervous for Extinction 2 as they wanted to steer clear of aliens, which is interesting in its own right. But he then gave more details saying, even though cryptids had been on Earth for 600 million years before the rods of God woke them up, which is nuts to be just getting like extinction lore in my timeline in 2024. I love it, but let's move forward. And then he says, they were so nervous of COD in space, they were afraid of anything not feeling grounded. Even doing zombies was a stretch, but we had a fun approach and forced their hand and built it from the ground up. Plus, after many Guitar Hero and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games, I got to do licensed soundtracks again. So he's sort of leaning into reminiscing a little bit about IW Zombies here and about the fact that he was doing this less serious take and he wasn't forced into it. So he wants to defend the fact that he wasn't forced in to that decision. But then I responded saying, okay, so you wanted to poke fun at the game, like as he admitted to here, right? Like he wanted to poke fun at the game going to space with warp drives and do something goofy. So he wanted to be goofy compared to other zombies modes of his own volition. Like I said, fine so far. But now there's a much narrower example of something similarly goofy, which is just an optional toggle in the game. You're not forced to use it. Like, it's an option, right? But that's a bridge too far. Why? Like, why is this so bad? And I then followed up, just to be clear, saying, you know more than most. I am definitely not here to carry water for Activision, and you guys know that as well. I'm not here to just shill for them. I will absolutely take them down if they need to be taken down, and I will absolutely critique them if they need to be critiqued. I did that like 3 days ago with a video about them lying. Like, I do this all the time. But I said, I'm just really genuinely curious why Goofy A, his game, is good, but Goofy B, the option here, the very narrow, small little option, is bad. Especially when literally nobody is losing in scenario B, the option, because it's optional. It's an option, right? You can just choose to ignore it. Like, why does that matter? And his response here was to say, if this was a gun in-game that turns spiders into sperm spiders, or a switch in-game with a puzzle around it, that would be fine. The fact that it's a toggle that swaps the models of vermin zombies to more friendly variants in the accessibility solution settings, that makes it lame. And like, I don't know, man. I feel like I'd actually really like to have a more in-depth conversation with Brian about this, because I suspect that underneath whatever kind of rage baiting he might be doing here on the timeline, or just sort of like being a little bit sassy in a way that's not really typical of ex-COD devs, underneath all of that stuff, there might be some interesting insights here about the way that he sort of approaches design philosophy and the way that these sorts of solutions could be a bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like diegetic? Potentially, in the sense that right now you've got a setting in the menu where you toggle it on, but what if, for example, there was an Easter egg that you could do at round 1 in every match before you ever saw a spider, where you like crush a spider under your boot in spawn, and then that means that for the rest of the game, you've got the arachnophobia spiders enabled, whereas if you just don't crush the bug round 1, you don't have it enabled. Kind of like the Rampage Inducer, making it part of the gameplay experience could be cooler than just making it a toggle in a menu. Like, if that's kind of the direction he's going in here, then fair enough, actually. As much as, like, at face value, I looked at his tweets and I was like, he's rage baiting. Maybe there is some substance to his argument, and maybe the shots at COD have, like, a slither of validity, and I would be willing to hear him out on that. So Brian, this is an invitation. If you want to come on the No Nonsense podcast and talk about some of your design philosophy, you are more than welcome. But if he's purely just complaining the fact that people with arachnophobia are getting a setting that means that they don't have to deal with their arachnophobia while they're playing Call of Duty, I think that that's him being lame at that point. Like, that's just soft. To be so wound up about other people getting something that makes their life easier, which doesn't affect your experience at all because it's an optional toggle that's off by default, that's just lame. That's lame. It's the thing that he's accusing the game of. So Brian, yeah, I'd love to hear you out, but let me know where you stand on this in the comments down below. Do you agree with Brian, or do you think that actually he's just sort of complaining about nothing? Thanks for watching the video today, guys. I will continue to update you as we get more patch notes in the future, and I will speak to you soon if you're subscribed, and if you're not subscribed, then I will never talk to you ever again. Subscribe. Okay, goodbye.